Well, hello everybody here in YouTube and Facebook land, and this is William and the William Show, and Ellie's going to be setting to the side. I can see here in the chat room, Karen's here and Linda's here. Hello. Hope everybody's doing well today. So we've had quite a bit going on this weekend. Of course, we know there's a couple wars going on, and that's, as important as it is. But here's what I'd like to talk about today. Mostly it's about, our exercise in global power dynamics between, the forces of the teachings of the Frankfurt University on communism and Nazism and its impacts on free enterprise and freedom of speech and religion here in the United States, and its flare-ups, like what's happening in Gaza and Ukraine. Keep in mind, both of these are contests that have come about because of folks that are either wed to the communist or Nazi ideologies who want to destroy the free West. There's even Jewish people that want that. There's even our alphabet crew here in the United States wants to help our friends in Hamas. It's kind of a crazy time. So what I'm kind of almost could be possibly, if I wanted to be upset about, was this little protest in the nation's capital. And these protesters, which I don't mind them protesting, by the way. I have no problem with protests. What I have a problem with is when they start defacing the nation's house. So, if you're the alphabet family or, liberal Jewish group here in the United States or supporters of Hamas, we don't really care. But don't put your paint, don't climb the fence of the American family's house. It's not your place. You have no right to demand anything from us. All right? And if you believe you do, we don't. There's 150 million Americans that would have very little problem with unengineering your Palestinian protest and hate fest. So, yeah, that. Okay, now we can move on. William has his opinions out of the way. So we had a little blowout in Congress in one of the hearings. I noticed something over the weekend. Josh Hawley and Mr. Mayorkas got into, a little disagreement over, the southern border thing. And I noticed something that came out of Mr. Mayorkas that I noticed was coming out of Fatah. I'm sorry, not Fatah, but the Hezbollah leader. And that is the index finger pointed towards you, not from the palm of your hand, but from the back of your hand, like the Muslim one, only God finger when they're berating the West. And I'm wondering it's just opinion, but I got to ask the question, is Mr. Mayorkas communist or Muslim? Because it seems like both those groups are, and he's using that kind of signage, if you will. All right, moving on. Our southern border. So we have special encounters at the southern border with, immigrants. And turns out since June of 2021 till June of 2023, we had just 67,000 special immigrants from about 14 terrorist countries. Most of them adult males of fighting age in good shape that are here to marry into the American family and pursue their what? What is it they're here to pursue? I'm concerned. All right, moving on. Here's a
William, hold on a sec. I don't know if many realize, but when Obama swore into office, he swore in on the Quran, which is a Muslim Bible.
Well, we're seeing all kinds of acts in these administrators that are coming up through the administration that for all intents and purposes come right straight out of the Social Internationale. Basically, it was created by communist hegemony in Europe. And they're in lockstep. They're in lockstep on all the major news medias. They're in lockstep all across Europe. The only thing they have in difference with each other in Europe seems to be whether they're part of the Social Internationale or Socialist Internationale or, Nazi groups. I think there's less in Europe than either one of those two groups combined as far as people in voting blocks. It's kind of concerning me, and it looks like it's trickling into the United States at an all-time rate. Is that what you were talking about, Ellie?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. Next on our blotter, William's just going to, go through what I've seen. I'm not going to go into the Gaza thing heavily because we already kind of get an idea of what's happening. The same thing in Ukraine, but there's no good information coming out of either one. And 8-day-old pictures and videos from other parts of the world just don't mean too much to us. So with respect to those two wars, all we have is a little bit of information coming out of the United States. So President Z is to meet with, guess who? Our Australian Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. Now, who is this guy? He's the very same guy. Now, you got to keep in mind that there's an Asian summit on Asian economies, okay? So this isn't just a one-off. It's everybody. And President Biden's going to meet Z at the same time or around the same time at this summit in Asia. Anyhow, this Anthony Albanese is the same guy that worked out the deal with the United States to get a couple nuclear submarines. And he looked awful happy the last time he was shaking President Xi's hand, Premier Xi's hand. I don't know. I'm not feeling too good about that. I don't think you all should feel very good about that. Maybe we better relook at what we're sending, what Japan, who seems to know what side they're on, and South Korea, that mostly knows what side they're on, and Taiwan, that can't exist except for being on the side they are on with the United States. So I'm a little bit concerned about this Anthony Albanese. He's playing pretty hard on both sides of the street, and I'm afraid maybe he's already fallen in the ditch. Okay. Hezbollah leader Navrali, right? And he's wearing his head wrappings, right? But he's wearing the Persian black head wrappings, you know, the intimidating head wrappings, the whatnot. Anyway, he was all dressed up in his garb, and they fired Grad missiles from the north into Israel from Lebanon, and threatened to go to war with Israel if Israel doesn't de-escalate in Gaza. And while he's spouting all this business, he's got the one finger up, just like, you know, the Ayatollah does, right? They all do it. And you pretty much tell where they come from, what their ideology is based on their hands gestures. Anyway, at the same time he's threatening all this and, you know, bad-mouthing the United States, of course, you know, he's praising Hamas. Surprise, surprise. I don't know how that even happens. Seems like Israel has a whole bunch of people around them that want to ensure they have no country to be in. And, well, be in and be are kind of the same thing for these folks. All right. So, Fatah has been acting up over on the West Bank, Transjordan, if you will, and in Hebron, Tabas, Ramallah, Jenin, there have been gunplay with Israel, and some people have lost their lives, and the West Bank's threatening to get involved with the mess that's going on in Gaza if you know, the United States doesn't talk Israel into backing down for a humanitarian pause, they call it. While at the same time, we have our supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei of Iran, is praising the attacks by Hamas, you know, this genocidal insanity that went on. And by the way, the people that came into Israel as those Hamas fighters were not given directions on how to behave when they came into Israel. That is just what they have been taught as far as hate to be capable of, growing up as children and young adults. So just thought I'd share that. And of course, Hamas has been trained and equipped and financed by our friendly Iranian leader, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. And of course, he's threatening the United States and Israel to go to war with us if, you know, this thing in Gaza doesn't spool down. But of course, he's been threatening that anyway, so it doesn't matter. Moving on.
Now, William, now there was 60 hostages that had disappeared, and they're bombing the tunnels at this point. And they said that according to Hamas, 60 hostages are lost because Israel blew up the tunnels. So that's going to be a huge negotiation issue. And I only heard it over the weekend. I think I heard it Saturday
So
morning.
that's stirring up the Israelis in Israel. They're having protests there over Benjamin Netanyahu getting into office. Of course, that was very contentious in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And then loss of the hostages, and on the word of Hamas, which isn't worth a hell of a lot if you ask me, and using them as human shields,
Yeah.
meat shields, if you will. Seriously, let's call it what it is, meat shields.
And they did
And
say they took down
Israel
one of the
doesn't
biggest.
know where these hostages are.
They said they did.
Israel knows where. Go ahead.
They said over. I think yesterday they did take down one of the biggest Hamas underground compounds. So they're making headway. So I just wanted to throw that in there for the recent info that I had. So go ahead.
Right. So they destroyed a major complex of the Gazans Hamas military there in Gaza. Anyway, so when you're in a war and you can't decipher between who is and who isn't a combatant, right? Innocent people die. You're asking a soldier on a front line who has been and is being and is going to be shot at to decide at the spur of the moment, at the speed of life, who is and who isn't. Now that includes the frontline soldier, the guy in the tank, the guy in the aircraft, wherever they are, the guys manning the howitzers. They don't know. And in a war, you can't afford to find out. Guess what's going to happen? There's going to be collateral damage. Now, people talk about surgical strikes. There's no such thing in war. There's no such thing. There's just less damage and more damage. And if you're a civilian, when the damage is happening, the damage is going to happen to you. So, just being frank about that, I'm just going to move on. I've listened to every philosophical dead end this weekend. I'm kind of just, done with all of that. So we have some Palestinian folks around the world, here in the United States, all across the subcontinent, up into Persia, Baghdad, all across Europe, well, here, there, and everywhere. They're ranting. They're upset. They're having emotions, right? Because they started a war and are getting pounded. So they're apoplectic. Okay. Moving on. So what have we seen? We've seen in D.C., New York, and Los Angeles, our alphabet friends, both communists and Nazis, of course, and even our non-practicing and aesthetic Jewish folks protesting on behalf of Gaza and Hamas and a humanitarian ceasefire. So they had one. It was for 3 hours to let people in northern Gaza, civilians, transfer themselves across the checkpoint to southern Gaza. It was a free road. It was advertised. It was given a time, a place, It was secured by Israel. And guess what happened? Our fine Palestinian friends took it as a wonderful opportunity to kill their own civilians. Great. So that's what they're doing. And of course, the likes of Angelina Jolie are very upset about that because it was a ceasefire. They did exactly what they asked for. So what happened, Angelina? Okay, moving on. We had General Lloyd Austin and the FBI director in front of Congress being asked questions. Anyway, one of the senators asked General Lloyd Austin, he's the Secretary of Defense, whether or not the United States had the minimum stocks of munitions necessary to fight both a war, for the U.S. to fight a war, and supply our allies. And apparently General Austin couldn't answer that question. How is that even possible? We're starting World War III and we haven't gone to a military, war footing yet. And is that going to happen, guys? If you're Democrats and you're starting wars all over the world and we're here at the cusp, the brink of World War III, why aren't you guys creating munitions? Or is it you don't want to win? All right, moving on. It's just a question. Now, our fine Turkish ally has threatened to go to war with Israel and, in turn, the United States if Israel tries to, wipe out Hamas. So, what does that mean? Well, number one, the United States is going to be sending lots of munitions to Israel. And number two, NATO's going to go to war with NATO. So number three, NATO is dead. Don't want to hear any more about NATO. It's just a piece of paper that nobody's involved with. All right. So, in Ukraine, the Russians are making slow but steady advances into Ukraine. An Odessa museum was rocketed over the weekend and historic paintings were damaged and destroyed. Yep. And pro-Palestinians tried to overrun an Air Force base in Turkey. It was like a tsunami of protesters. And they were using water cannons and tear gas, and they were just about to hit rubber bullets and go on to lead when they were pushed back. Not a good situation, especially with Blinken in the country. Just saying, guys, you're a NATO country with us. Think about it. Do you want to be part of us? Go in your own way. Okay, everybody's having to choose sides here. And they're having to get right down to, brass tacks, look into their heart, into the dark heart of the choices being delivered to us by Red Pack. And our fine EU globalists. Great. Pakistan. So what's going on in Pakistan? The Pakistan government is tired of fighting terrorism in their own country in the north, on the border, in Pakistan, with Afghani refugees. So they're throwing them all out. They gave them until, I don't know, it was like the 12th of last month. They're still trying to leave, but they're being pushed out, up over the Khyber Pass into Afghanistan into winter with no homes to go to. And there's just about 2 million of them. So, Muslim world, don't complain if Gazans all of a sudden end up in Egypt like Afghanistanis end up in Afghanistan. Just saying, it's about to happen. Get okay with it. You do it. They do it. Well, then we all do it, right? Moving on. So, I did a little research this weekend, and it wasn't easy. I mean, it really wasn't easy. I was watching over the last half year or so. Biden is a strong Catholic, and he's also states he's strong Irish, and he has, you know, that Irish bloodline. But there's something he doesn't have, an Irish last name. So this is probably why Dublin was a little angry with him showing up when he did. In Old English, Biden means buttons. And so his family came from button makers in England from, you know, the 1600s, 1400s. And they didn't tend to be a particularly functional group, we'll just say. So in order to get along, the family had to kind of marry into families with lords and ladies, and they became minor aristocracy. So the Biden family, Joe Biden's grandfather and great-grandfather are English minor aristocracy. Just happens that Biden's father moved into a town in Pennsylvania, you know, kind of in a triangle between Pittsburgh and Delaware, and then out into Pennsylvania, where he ended up in a working class neighborhood, and there was, you know, Polish folks there, and there's Italians there, and there were Irish there, and he said to himself, "Self, I need a wife." And there was a lady by the name of Finnegan, and that became Joe Biden's mother. So that's that. And then there was this little thing that happened. It was called World War II, and Biden's became kind of rich for a little while because they were part of a corporation that was doing war manufacturing. But when the war was over, it was back to our more humble roots. And so I also found out another little thing. So most of them initially came to New York. And so there's a number of Bidens that have been in New York and been in the news and whatnot. But there's this kind of trend in the family that people, when they get to an older age, fall upstairs. When they're ascending stairs going up, they fall down. No, so it's not just Joe. This is a family thing. All right, that was an interesting little deal I found. And it turns out, you know, Joe's father had tried to start a couple businesses once he went up to Boston to become a furniture maker, and of course his partner ran off with his money that he had earned during World War II, and then he tried to start another business, and you know, that collapsed. And so then he ends up cleaning boilers for a heating and air conditioning company, and then later on becomes a used car dealer while Joseph Biden is going to college. And then when Joe becomes a senator for Delaware, which is, by the way, where a lot of Biden settled, Delaware into Pittsburgh and around into Pennsylvania. It's a little area right there. Bidens have historically lived in. So, yeah, and the family was having financial trouble, so they had to move in with his mother's family because his father's family couldn't care for him. So that's kind of a bad deal. I don't look down on Joe for that. Lots of people come from humble beginnings. That's what America's all about. But after Joseph Biden becomes a senator, his father quits being a used car salesman because he didn't want a senator's father being found being a used car salesman. So there's that. And so I don't really think this claim by the Bidens that they're big on the Irish is as much as, and I don't think the Irish are big on them. So it is what it is. That's what I found out. And I was kind of interested. It was difficult to get beyond Biden's father, right? You had to come in from the back door from England and then trace your way forward into America. That has all been blocked. So the genealogist in me popped out there. Moving on. So, darn. We have a weak administration. For whatever reason, wars are popping up everywhere. Whatever they touch turns to clay. And they're trying to stop World War III. So what do? And you've already sent in a couple carrier strike groups and nobody's paying attention. Well, let's move an Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine up the Suez Canal for everybody to see. Great. Now that's diplomacy at its very best. Not too impressed. Joe, show a little strength at home. We wouldn't have to do this for you. Just saying. Okay. So yeah, there's a lot of protests in England and Trafalgar Square, in almost every major city in the world. There cannot be this many Palestinian refugees. It's impossible. 60,000 everywhere. I mean, everywhere from Australia to England and everywhere in between, north to south, including South America, please. These folks are, while they are Palestinians, I believe they're also communist Palestinians, by the way. All right. Singapore. This is exciting. The previous British holding of Singapore in the Far East is getting an award for its work on the Green New Deal. Yay for Singapore. Well, sort of. Anyway, so, yeah, there's that. Next. So the Asian Trading Nations Conference is coming. The summit with Biden, Xi, all the big wigs of all the countries that do exporting in and about Asia. So that's very exciting. That's about to happen. Now, while all of this has been happening, central bank has been busy getting ready for the new central banking digital dollar, so that Americans can be tracked in everything they do, spend, travel, can be throttled in any way they want, the whole business. So the Fed is just very excitedly doing its global business for the famous Klaus Schwab, while the Georgie Porgy is out running buses of protesters into all of the finer U.S. cities. So, yeah, that's happening. And that ship, I can't remember the name of the ship actually, it's a roll-on supply ship for the U.S. Navy, was protested so badly in San Francisco, they had to go up to Tacoma, Washington to pick up their load. So there they are. So that's the world news. I'm not seeing much else besides that of particular interest. No, there's not going to be a nuclear war because there's a ballistic missile submarine in the Mediterranean. It's just, you know, the administration's just weak. It's weak. And so it's got to try to do something. And that's not how you do it, guys. Just saying. You could call up former President Trump or, I don't know, George Bush, ask him how you stop this stuff from happening if you don't want it to happen, if you don't want to go to war yourself. They have ideas. Just saying. Ideas. We can learn from them. There's no sense reinventing the wheel, guys. So that's what we have for this day, the 6th, on a Monday, in the year of our Lord, November 6th of 2023. I'm probably going to be taking up a little slack for Ellie this week. There's things going on. She'll explain it to you. And we expect a lot more pertinent information to come out. By Tuesday afternoon, the information fire hose really unleashes. What we've had this weekend has been interesting, but really nothing particularly new, except for the fact that Israel is bombing some tunnels, and there have been some tunnel collapses because of it. So, and there were big protests, and Palestinians were emotional. So, thank you for tuning in. Please leave any questions you might have. I'll look here on the chat and try to update mine so I can make sure it's coming in. Is there any information or questions from Mary or Linda or Mary Jo or Karen, and that I could quickly answer before we go? If they are married, do they automatically stay as citizens? So, the person that gets married has to become a U.S. citizen, but the children will become citizens unless the born in the United States thing gets changed. So no, they have to naturalize, but they go to the front of the line because they're married to a U.S. citizen. And that's part of the deal. The other part of the deal is, this isn't really politically correct, but if you're dark-haired from some other part of the world, one of your primary goals is to marry a citizen of wherever you're going that is of lighter color. So if you're a darker female, you want to find a man that's of lighter color. If you're a darker male, you want to find a female that's of lighter color. I've run into folks like this during my romps around the country, and noticed it from other places in the world. It just it is. So when Muhammad marries into your Christian family with your Catholic raised daughter, that's what's happening. So if you're okay with it, you're okay with it. If you're not, speak up, before the knots tied. Just saying, guys. All right. What else do we have? Right. Karen's right. Just marrying doesn't automatically make them a citizen. That's true. But it, like I said, it drives you to the front of the line. So there's that. And if the spouse that's from the other place in the world decides to go home with your child, there's no guarantee you'll have parental rights. Guys, so if your husband runs off with your children to Albania, guess what? Or your wife runs off with your children to Brazil, tough luck. That's kind of the deal. So be careful with these international marriages. They can have positive and negative repercussions. Okay. Thanks, Ellie, for the opportunity. You can cut me loose now, and we hope to see you again here tomorrow. And I should have a lot better news and a lot better information on what's going on within the power dynamics of the world and what the real pushes and pulls are and by whom. So thanks for your attention, and thanks for your loyalty ship through Ellie, and we hope to help Ellie through this week.